6 men gathered in the dark underbelly of Memphis, a council of cowards plotting a sanctioned hit. Their mark? Nat King Cole, the man with the velvet voice that charmed the nation. A man who walked with the grace of a king, but his power angered the wrong people. The plan was cold and calculated. Wait for the curtains to close. Tail him. Corner him. Beat him into silence with baseball bats. A warning shot to anyone who dared rise above their station. But they failed to account for the wild card. Bumpy Johnson, the Harlem godfather. When word reached him that the singer was marked for death, Bumpy didn't negotiate. He didn't send a soldier. He boarded a train and brought the storm with him. 1,000 miles of cold fury. He stepped into that basement with ice in his veins. No bats, just his razor and a death stare that froze the air. That night, 6 men learned the true meaning of fear. They realized they had crossed the wrong line. September 1950. Memphis, Tennessee. Nat King Cole was 31. Standing at the summit of the world, Mona Lisa was #1. He broke the barrier. He sat at the table where only white men used to eat. A genius on the keys, a voice that could charm a snake. He was absolute class. Everyone loved him. And that was the threat. That was the danger. 1950. The South was a loaded gun. The air was thick with tension, ready to spark. Men of color were rising. They were becoming kings in a land that wanted them as servants. The old guard was trembling. Nat was the symbol of everything they hated. Excellence they couldn't control. A force of nature. Wealthy. Famous. Untouchable. A man who looked them in the eye and didn't blink. He didn't know his place? No. He owned the place, and that was unforgivable. So, when the Ellis Auditorium date was set for September 17th, the bosses decided to intervene. To make an example, September 8th, 9:45 p.m., Garrett's Steakhouse, the belly of the beast. Marcus Webb drifted through the room, silent, invisible, a shadow in a tailored suit. He knew how to disappear in plain sight. 34 years old, a veteran of the service game. He saw everything. Garrett's was the seat of power, whites only, where the elite came to feed on expensive steak. They drank bourbon worth a week's wages. They cut deals that decided the fate of the city. But walls have ears, and Marcus heard every whisper. Table 7 was the danger zone. Suits, smoke, and the loud, ugly laughter of men who think they are gods. Marcus clocked them instantly. The owners, the heavy hitters, the men who pulled the strings in Memphis. He filled their glasses, face like stone, ears tuned to the frequency of violence. This singer thinks he can walk into our town? The disrespect, spat the man at the head. Crenshaw spoke, a man who built buildings on the backs of others. Cruel eyes, heavy hands. Nat King Cole, Edward Willis chimed in. The banker, counting other people's money. He's banking millions while we watch? It's a slap in the face. He needs a lesson in humility. We will handle it. The voice was cold, controlled. It belonged to David Morrison. A detective, a badge that hid a monster. The streets whispered his name in fear. Thursday, Carl's basement. We lock it down. We end this charade. Tucker, the lumberman, laid it out. Bats, the parking lot. Brutal efficiency, clean and simple. Laughter followed. Marcus didn't flinch. He kept the bourbon flowing while his blood turned to ice. Carl Jennings raised a toast. To the message, he grinned. To crushing the spirit of a man who dared to fly too high. They drank to violence. Marcus stood firm. Inside, his mind was a storm. The clock was ticking. The hit was on. Thursday night, 11:30. Once the room cleared, Marcus made his move. He hit the kitchen, found the payphone. His hands finally trembled as the adrenaline hit. He punched in the numbers. A code he kept for a life or death scenario. A lifeline to the north. The instruction was simple. If the heat gets too high, if the situation is critical, you call the GodFather. 3 rings, A voice like gravel answered. Deep, authoritative. Yeah, Mr. Johnson. This is Webb. Memphis. I have intel you need to hear. It's urgent. It concerns Nat King Cole. Silence on the line. The air grew heavy. Then, speak. The sit-down was set for Thursday. Carl Jennings' hardware store, down in the basement. They had the bats ready, and the parking lot mapped out for the hit, September 17th. The night of the concert. When the kid finished spilling the beans, Bumpy Johnson didn't say a word. The silence was heavy. You got faces to match these names? Yes, sir. I poured their drinks all night. I got every one of 'em memorized. One's a badge. Detective David Morrison. Good work, Marcus. You did right by calling me. Now, open your ears. Bury this conversation. It never happened. You punch the clock tomorrow just like any other day. Keep your mouth shut. You capiche? Yes, sir. But listen good. If things go sideways, if they even look at you funny, you ring this line. I'll take care of it. Mr. Johnson, are you going to stop 'em? Bumpy's voice dropped to absolute zero. Stop 'em? I'm going to do a hell of a lot more than that. I'm going to ensure they never look at another black artist wrong, for as long as they draw breath. Click! The line went dead. Marcus hung up, his hands trembling like leaves. He didn't know the legend of Bumpy Johnson. Just a name, a number, a cold voice from the shadows. But that voice carried a promise. Nat King Cole wasn't going to be touched. Bumpy cradled the receiver and sat in the quiet for a solid minute. 35 years old, the undisputed king of Harlem, 3 years out of Sing Sing, and he already owned the numbers racket. The protection network was solid iron. He'd made it crystal clear to every wise guy in New York. Harlem was his turf. But Memphis, that was 1,000 miles of road away, 9 days on the clock. And 6 racists with a badge in their pocket were plotting to clip Nat King Cole. Bumpy eyed the stack on his desk. 18 grand. Just the week's take from the numbers. Enough to buy a block. Enough to build an empire. Enough to make people listen. He shoved the cash aside. 5 in the morning. Bumpy packed 2 sharp suits, his kit, his straight razor, and a .38 special. He caught the 6 o'clock train southbound. Penn Station to Memphis. 40 hours cutting through 6 states. He moved in silence. No goodbyes. Stephanie St. Clair could hold down the fort while he was gone. Because some things, they matter more than the business. Some things are worth the long haul and every greenback in his pocket. The voice of Nat King Cole was one of those things. 40 hours later, Bumpy stepped onto the platform at Memphis Union Station. The heat smacked him in the face. Southern humidity, thick, heavy, and wet. Nothing like the New York chill. He checked into a boarding house on Beale Street, signed in as William Jackson, paid cash up front for the week. Then, it was time to go to work. By Monday afternoon, Bumpy had made his first move. Samuel Sweet Sam Johnson, a barber who cut hair in Harlem back in the 30s before heading home to the South. Sam owed Bumpy a debt from the old days. Bumpy strolled into Sam's barber shop at 3 sharp. The place went dead silent. Sam looked up from his razor, and the blood drained from his face. Bumpy Johnson? Lord have mercy. After they flipped the sign to closed, they talked. Bumpy laid out the names. Sam filled in the blanks. First up, Thomas Crenshaw. Construction money. Racist to the bone. Tied tight to the White Citizens Council. Then Edward Willis. Bank manager bankrolling the hate. Robert Hayes. Insurance man. Quiet, but brutal. James Tucker. Lumber. Supplies the wood for the Klan's burning crosses. And David Morrison. The detective. The muscle. The guy who'd make sure the murder looked like an unfortunate accident. The spot. Carl Jennings' hardware store. They ain't playing games, Bumpy, Sam whispered. The council wants to send a message. Nat Cole is the perfect target. famous enough to make headlines, black enough to hate. Where's Jennings' store? Sam sketched out a map, September 11th to the 13th. For 3 days, Bumpy was nothing but a ghost in Memphis. He staked out the hardware store, memorized every inch, found the basement door in the back alley. Unlocked. No guard dog. Total amateurs. He slipped $20 to a cleaning lady at First National. She gave up Willis's schedule, his routine, his soft spots. He shadowed Detective Morrison, trailed him from the station house to Murphy's Tavern, where the badge drowned his sorrows after every shift. By Wednesday night, the 13th, Bumpy held all the cards. 6 names, 6 faces, 6 dead men walking. The meet was set. Thursday, September 14th, 9 p.m. Jennings' basement. The concert was Sunday, the 17th. Ellis Auditorium. The plan? Baseball bats and a parking lot ambush. Bumpy had 24 hours to stop the clock. One night to end the war before it started. September 14th, 1950, 8:45 p.m. Bumpy stood in the alley behind the hardware store, draped in shadows and black wool. In his right hand, his straight razor. The .38 special was tucked tight against his gut. 9:10 p.m. The whole crew had gathered. Through the dirty glass, Bumpy could hear the chatter, laughing like hyenas, joking about hurting the kid. Bumpy checked the back entrance. Open. He slid inside like a ghost in a suit. One bulb swung from the ceiling, casting long shadows. 6 mooks sitting around a cheap pine table. Half a dozen baseball bats lined the wall. On the table, a map of Ellis Auditorium was spread out, a big, heavy X, marking the spot where they planned to whack Nat King Cole. They were so busy plotting the hit, they didn't hear the Reaper walk in. Bumpy shut the door. Click. That soft sound spun 6 heads, 6 pale faces staring at one black man in a tailored suit. 3 seconds of dead silence. Then Crenshaw kicked his chair back. "Who sent you? This is a private sit-down." Bumpy strolled to the table and dropped his razor right on the target, covering the X. "Sit down," he said it soft. Crenshaw stayed standing. "I don't care who you think," Bumpy flashed the .38, keeping it low by his leg. I said, "Sit the hell down." Crenshaw sat. Bumpy scanned the room. 6 big guys, all bigger than him, all with weapons close by. And I could smell the fear. "The name is Bumpy Johnson. I'm from Harlem, New York, and word on the street is you boys are looking to clip someone. Nat King Cole." Edward Willis tried to play dumb. "We ain't doing, don't insult my intelligence." Bumpy's voice cracked like a whip. "I got the roster. Thomas Crenshaw, Edward Willis, Robert Hayes, James Tucker, David Morrison. Yeah, I made you, detective. And Carl Jennings, dumb enough to host a conspiracy in his own cellar." He pointed at the lumber. "I know you bought 6 brand new sluggers. I know the whole play. Wait for the show to end. Tail him. Beat the man to a pulp. Send a message." They looked at each other, nervous. Willis reached for his hip, muscle memory looking for his badge and his piece. But he left the iron at the precinct. Bad move for a private meeting. "You looking for this?" Bumpy tapped the heater. "I'm holding, detective." "You ain't. So park it and keep your mouth shut." Morrison froze up. "Here is how this plays out." Bumpy's voice was ice cold, almost polite, which made the blood run cold. September 17th. Nat King Cole walks into that hall. He sings. He walks out. And he leaves Memphis without a bruise. Crenshaw decided to be a hero, or maybe just a fool. He grabbed for a bat. Bumpy moved fast. Not the pistol, the razor. The steel flashed in the light. Crenshaw howled. A red line opened up on his reaching arm. Not deep enough to cut the cords, but deep enough to bleed and leave a nasty souvenir. Crenshaw fell back hard into his seat, clutching his arm while blood hit the concrete. Bumpy held up the blade, dripping wet. "Anybody else want a piece?" Dead still. "Good. Let's get something straight. You think you're tough 'cause you got bats and a badge? Let me school you on what real trouble looks like. Bumpy circled the table slowly. Blade in the left, heater in the right. Real danger is a man driving 1,000 miles for a guy he never shook hands with. Real danger is a guy who's buried more bodies than you've ever scared. That's me, right here, deciding if you boys get to see tomorrow. He stopped behind Robert Hayes, placed the cold steel against his neck. Hayes turned to stone. This razor opened 37 throats in Harlem. Harder men than you. Smarter men. You know what they messed up? They stayed quiet. Now all I hear is Hayes shaking. They forgot that some folks are off limits. Some lines you just don't cross. He pressed just enough to draw a bead of red. Hayes made a sound like a dying dog. Nat King Cole is a made man in my book. He is Harlem's voice. And we look after our own, no matter how far the drive. Bumpy let him go. Hayes slumped forward, clutching his bleeding neck. A dark spot spread on Tucker's trousers. The guy pissed himself. Now, here is the new deal, Bumpy said. September 17th. You boys are ghosts. Stay home. Go to work. Go pray. But you don't get within a mile of the king, Willis whispered. What if we say no? Then I wipe the floor with all 6 of you. Bumpy said it like ordering coffee. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but I will come for you, one by one, and I will close your books. He walked back, grabbed the map, and ripped it down the middle. I know where you sleep. I know where you earn. I know the schools. Edward Willis, your little girl has piano on Tuesdays. Mrs. Henderson's place on Poplar Street. And you, Carl Jennings. I know your wife hits Cooper's Market every Saturday morning. David Morrison. I know you drown your sorrows at Murphy's Tavern the second your shift ends. The color drained from their faces. Listen closely. If anything happens to Nat King Cole here in Memphis, or anywhere in this country, I'll take it personally. And when I come back, I won't be bringing a razor. I'll bring gasoline and a match. Bumpy headed for the exit, then paused. One more thing. Crenshaw is leaking. Patch him up. Tell the hospital he was clumsy with some broken glass. Because if a whisper of this meeting gets out, if I see a police report or read about it in the papers, I'll know who opened their mouth. And in my world, talking has grave consequences. He drilled a hole through each man with his stare. September 17th. Stay inside, stay breathing. Bumpy stepped out into the cold Memphis night. September 17th, 1950. Ellis Auditorium. Bumpy had been staking out the joint since the afternoon, positioned across the street like a statue, eyes scanning every entrance, reading every face, clocking every car entering the lot. 7:30, sharp. The king arrives in a black Cadillac, steps out, flashes that $1,000,000 smile to the crowd. Bumpy ignored the charm. He was working, scanning the mob, hunting for the 6 targets. Ghosts. They weren't there. 8 o'clock. Nat takes the stage. 2,000 people on their feet instantly. Bumpy ghosted inside, claiming the shadows at the back of the hall. Then Mona Lisa began. That voice commanded the room. Smooth. Flawless. It reminded Bumpy why he traveled 1,000 miles, why he walked into a basement of wolves alone, why he put his life on the table. Because talent like this, it's untouchable. Show's over. Nat signed autographs in the lot, laughing with fans, posing for pictures. He hopped in the caddy and made it to the hotel without a scratch. Bumpy held his post until the taillights faded. Job done. He headed for the train station. Caught the midnight iron horse back to Harlem. Nat King Cole? He never knew about the basement. Never knew 6 men were waiting with baseball bats to break him. Never knew Bumpy Johnson crossed state lines and spilled blood to keep him breathing. All he knew was that the show went perfect. The audience loved him. He was safe. Fast forward to 1963, 2 years before the end. Ebony magazine interview. The reporter asks the hard question. You toured the South. back when it was a war zone for us. Were you scared? Nat just smiled that gentle smile. I should have been, he admits. The threats were real. The hate was heavy. But I felt shielded, like guardian angels were on the clock. Angels? Maybe just good people, Nat mused. Strangers. People who thought the music mattered more than the hate. That beauty was worth the fight. He looked out the window. I like to think people were fighting for me when I didn't even know I was in a war. That's faith. That's love. He was right about the fighting, but that someone wasn't an angel. It was Bumpy Johnson, carrying a straight razor and a code of honor. Harlem protects its own. Even 1,000 miles from the block, back at the Memphis boarding house, the landlady found a parting gift in Bumpy's room. An envelope, a Benjamin inside, and a note for Marcus Webb's family. Tell him William Jackson pays his debts. The money found its way to Marcus. Marcus read the note. It clicked. The warning was real. The protection was solid iron. The king was saved by a ghost he'd never meet. As for the 6 tough guys in the basement, Thomas Crenshaw's arm was ruined. That scar ran wrist to elbow, ugly and permanent. Robert Hayes fled to Oklahoma 6 months later. Never breathed a word about that September night. David Morrison turned in his badge in '51. Personal reasons. The rest just stayed in Memphis. Stayed silent. Stayed far away from the stage. And whenever Nat's name came up on the radio, or in the papers, they changed the station, changed the subject immediately. Because they remembered the man with the razor. And they knew. The Don always keeps his promises. 6 guys planned a hit that night, but Bumpy Johnson ended the conversation before it even started. One man's blood hit the pavement so another man's voice could stay on the air. A waiter made a call that shifted the balance. This is the part of the story Nat King Cole never heard. The guardian he never met. The muscle he never saw. But Harlem knew the score. Memphis knew. And every racist in the South found out you can hate, you can threaten, you can scheme. But you don't touch Harlem's people. Not ever. Even 1,000 miles from the block. That is not just protection. That is loyalty. That is power. If you respect the code, the sacrifice, the silence, then pay your respects. Subscribe and smash that like. Send this to someone who needs to learn that real men don't look for applause. They just get the job done. Leave a word in the comments. Ever had someone watching your 6 from the shadows? Let's keep these stories alive. The King of Harlem stood up for our best, and that is a legacy that deserves to be told.